special edition of Beyond the Hype. So, I get my disclaimers out up front. A lot of the guests that I have on the show, I'm interviewing them, I don't really know them. But today, I had a conversation with one of my favorite all-time people, my mentor, my longtime friend, my confidant, former boss when she was executive editor and VP editorial at Black Enterprise, role model from her time at Essence, world-class author. Audrey Edwards is here.
Alfred, I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you. You are one of my children who's done so well, and I'm so proud of you. I have several children like you, and I just claim you.
And you just keep on claiming me, because I'm sure going to claim you.
It is such a compliment. It's really a compliment. It always has been.
So listen, we talk a bunch of different things all the time, but this is for a specific occasion of the release of your latest book. Now, every book that I've read that you've written is very different from the other books that you've written. And,
yes.
and they've also become, in my mind, classics of that, like from Children of the Dream. And The Man from Essence I still think that should be like a miniseries on Netflix or something. That's just a great book.
Well, HBO Max bought the rights. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes. Maybe 6 months ago.
Well, they need to get on Max
bought, and it's going to be done as a limited series.
I can't wait.
Yes.
Listen,
yes.
If you want to have a great fun, I'm into business books and business biographies, and why should white guys have all the fun, and the great book, how to succeed in business without being white, and A.G. Gatsby's book Black Titans, all of which are necessary reads. Mm-hmm. But if you want to have a necessary business book, biography book read that's also fun, that's got a bunch of tea in it that can be spilled, you want to read The Man from Essence. And it's perfect as an HBO Max series. So I'm looking forward.
Yeah, I am too. Thank you. The difference with this book, Alfred, is that I wrote this myself. The others were co-authors. The Children from the Dream, I collaborated with Dr. Craig Polite, who's a Black psychologist, because we were looking at the psychology of Black success. Ed Lewis's book, Ed was the co-founder, and publisher of Essence. So that collaboration was me telling his story. And what I brought to that was my personal knowledge of women's magazine publishing, in particular, magazine publishing in general. But then he had a great personal story to tell. So it was, for me, a wonderful collaboration. And he was great to work with because he let me, as I tell people, write his book.
Yes.
He really didn't change anything. He has a strong voice himself. It's a quieter voice, but he's very strong. He's very political. And all of that came into telling his story. And it was a riveting story because it was a Black business story, and just the interactions with the people and trying to get money and dealing with the personalities. So it was a fun book to do, and he was great to work with.
Because he let me like me, because we're both magazine people. I put that book alongside one of my favorite movies, The Devil Wears Prada, because it's hard to explain magazine culture, especially magazine culture, if you're not in that culture. And both that book and that movie puts you inside that world where you think it doesn't matter. Like, you don't think cerulean blue matters. It matters to me because I'm style and fashion. Why does that matter? I was like, it matters. It just matters. You need to understand that there's more to it than it's a certain shade of blue. But before I go too far down that road, let's make sure we talk about the book we're talking about now, American Runaway.
Thank you.
Which I am, because I got it in, she made sure I got an early autograph copy. I'm not trying to rub it in, y'all, but I got it.
There are important influencers you want to have read your book. So even if they're friends of yours, you're also an influencer.
Well, let's jump right into it. Talk about the genesis of this book, and then we'll go into a deeper conversation about everything from the tradition of Black people literally leaving America to say, listen, I'm not having that anymore.
Yeah.
And
I was never
learned along the way in terms of one, making the decision to, and I'll let you tell the story of that, what led to the decision and what that decision was. And then of course the genesis of the book.
I said all along, if Trump got elected, and I never thought he would, that I would leave the country. So it was kind of a joke. But I don't joke like that. I'm not going to say something that out there if I don't mean it. So I meant it. Paris was a logical choice for me. One, I love the city, but more importantly, I knew people already who lived there. I had tried to retire to Paris in 2007, thinking that this would be a place, I could collect my Social Security and live happily ever after and run with the expat community. Paris then was too expensive. The European Union had just created the euro, and the value in 2007, it was something like $1.60 to the euro, which meant every time I went to the cash machine to get 200 euros, my Citibank account was debited $360.
Wow.
I said, well, I can't live here longer than 3 months. So I came back to the States, but I had met people. I had a sense of the city. It was a city I loved. So I knew if I had to leave, I had a place to go. When Trump was elected, it was like, oh my goodness, I've got to get out of here. So I had a date. He was elected in November of 2016. What I said to myself was, I'm going to be gone by the day he is inaugurated. Mm. So January 20th became my date for being gone. And I left January 19th, maybe wow. January 18th. It was an overnight flight. I got into Paris on January 19th. And the next day was the historic Women's March all over the world. And Paris, of course, was a part of that. And my friend Jo Lowry, who was my college roommate, was living in Paris. She had married a Frenchman. They were divorced, but I knew her. She had a place, an apartment. So when I tried to move in 2007, I stayed with her. And she had a big apartment. She and her husband had broken up, but she got to keep the apartment, and she was renting it out to students, and she rented me a room. So that was my background history. And she is the person, I didn't stay with her when I came in 2017. I had an apartment because I had met a Frenchman in 2007 who owned a studio. And I got in touch with him. It was available. So I had a place to stay, which was very important. And I had a friend, and I had another friend who was the cousin of somebody I knew here. I had met him. So by 10 years after trying to move to Paris, I had a base. And the really important thing, 10 years later, the European Union was in some ways catching hell. Greece was teetering, Turkey was teetering. So the euro had lost value against the dollar, which made it much more economically feasible to live there. It was still higher, but it wasn't, astronomical.
Right, right.
So now it was affordable. So the key thing I have said in terms of making any kind of move, whether it's to another city, another state, I feel you have to have a base. And at this age, I would never try to leave where I'm living to go somewhere else, not knowing anyone, not having a place to live, not being able to afford it. When you're younger, you can make those moves. Very often you're making a move for a job.
Right, right.
And where do you tend to meet people? You meet people at work. But if you're retired and going to another city or another country, you don't have those kind of connections.
Right, kind of a natural network that you're going to.
Right, that you're going into.
The other thing that I think is important about this, and we'll go to a deeper dive into the book and why you wrote it, is I think it's so important, and unfortunately my children have become this, even though I wasn't born this way, to raise Black people or to help Black people become citizens of the world.
Yes.
To have passports, to feel comfortable going to other countries, other cultures, whether you do it because you have to or you do it because you want to. And I didn't get my first passport until I was working for Black Enterprise by that time. So I was in my 30s. Of course, my older kids, their mothers from Jamaica, they've been going to Jamaica since they were babies. So they grew up with this idea that we go places, we go. And passport is a natural thing, but we know that most Americans, and certainly most Black Americans don't have a passport.
Right.
And as the world,
I don't know if most Americans do, Alfred, to tell
no,
you the truth.
most Americans don't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not just Black. Yeah.
Do. But I think for Black people in particular, and for our children and their children, I just think it should be a priority to become citizens of the world, no matter how connected you may be to the citizens of the country of your birth.
Right. Because one of the things traveling to other countries does is give you a much better perspective on America. And it gives you a better perspective on what it means to be Black in America. Because that experience in other countries is just not the same. My experience as a Black in Paris or Ghana or Japan when I was a kid is so different from my experience living in America, because race is not. Go ahead.
No, and that's why when you look at history, and sometimes as Black people we catch hell when we come back. When you look at the Black men who fought World War I, was told you're fighting for freedom and democracy, experienced a certain degree of freedom and equality in Europe in particular.
Exactly.
They came back, and a lot of people don't recognize a lot of the lynching, that wave of lynching of Black men in the early 1900s was about these Black men came back and really believed that they were going to be equal, and we got to put them in check.
That's right. The Red Summer was in 1919, which was right after World War I.
Yep.
And that's really when the exodus started for Black Americans going to Paris in particular, because the treatment was so different. There was a real respect on the part of the French for Black Americans, for the struggle, for our history, the fact that we came out of a civil war situation and we had been enslaved for 300 years. But as far as the French were concerned, because they loved our art, these were people who still created beautiful music, beautiful writing. They walked a certain way, they had a certain way of talking, and the French are very stylish. I mean, that's one of the things I think Black Americans like. You know, they look like you.
And we're stylish, right? They connected our sense of style and aesthetic and joie de vivre that fits French cultural life.
Yeah. So for the soldiers, it was the first time that they were, first of all, just had basic freedoms. You could walk down the street and not have to move aside because a white person was coming. You could go into any restaurant you wanted through the front door. You could ride a trolley car and not have to sit at the back. You could date French women and not fear that you were going to be lynched. So just the fact that you were treated as a human being was stunning to brothers who were not used to being treated like that. And then to have your culture affirmed. You know, the Harlem Hellfighters, which was the infantry unit out of Harlem, came with a band. They really brought the sound of jazz to Europe. And jazz was loved by the Europeans, Josephine Baker was adored. Even, you know, during World War II, that was her era. The Italian soldiers and the German soldiers loved her, which is why she became a spy. She became a spy for Charles de Gaulle's resistance fighters, because the Italian officers, she would be at their parties, wining and dining, and they would give up vital information, never suspecting that this Black woman that they adored was working for the French underground, for the French resistance fighters. So we had that kind of history and we had that kind of respect, and we still do.
Yes.
You know, I have a chapter in the book. One of my greatest moments was going into this very chic department store, Printemps, with these two little white girlfriends of mine. They were very little and petite, and they could wear all the French clothes. I couldn't wear anything until we got to the designer floor. And the elevator opens, and this very chic sales girl, young girl, comes running up to me, and she goes, "Oh, you are like Michelle Obama." And I'm like, who's she talking to? And she just carried on. I tried on all these clothes, everything I tried on. She was, "Oh, your height, your charisma, you are like Michelle Obama." And I'm thinking, this child is all of 25. She had to have been a kid when the Obamas came into the White House. But in France, they're revered. They're absolutely revered. So for me, it was the height of compliment to have this very stylish French child, as I called her, and everything I put on. But then at the end, it was like, okay, you know what? I'm getting sick of this because I really am not going to buy this $400 Diane von Furstenberg jumpsuit. It looks great, but I'm not going to buy it. So she kept saying, oh, you look so blah, blah, blah. And I finally said, listen, sweetheart, first of all, I don't have Michelle Obama's man, and I don't have her $65 million book advance.
Right.
So I'm not buying anything. So she kind of understood, and she looked at me and she's like, okay, but you still, you have the height, you have the charisma. And then I went across the street to Uniqlo and got some €9 sweatpants. So that was what I purchased that day. But it was such a boost, as you can imagine, to be in this French posh department store and having this person say, you look like Michelle Obama. And it was just, does that happen in America? No.
The standard of beauty in a way that we're not the standard of beauty.
Right.
Here.
Exactly. Exactly.
Talk to me about the initial reaction. I remember my reaction when you announced on Facebook, I'm out. Like Harriet Tubman, we out.
There were people
to the idea that Trump's in office, I'm out. I'm going to France.
You know what, Alfred, and it still happens, and it's happening now because there's a race issue going on in France. If one more person, and I said this in the book, if one more person says to me, but the French are racist too, I said, I'm going to learn enough French to curse them out because I didn't leave America because of its racism. Yes, every country has its racist elements. I left because of Donald Trump. What I knew, if there was an electoral population that put this man in office, the country has shifted. And it shifted in a way.
More about our country than it said about him.
Exactly. Because being in New York, being in real estate, we knew Donald Trump was a joke among the New York's real estate industry. He's a joke. He's not really rich. Whenever I'd go see my son, who's in New Jersey, I'd take the bus to Atlantic City. And for a while, the skyline of Atlantic City coming in by bus were boarded up Trump casinos. That was the first thing you saw, his boarded. So you come into a city with a skyline that is a monument to this man's business failures. Now he's the president. I knew what his racial politics were, although that was not the issue with him. New Yorkers knew who Trump was, which is why he could be run out.
Yes.
He was run out of New York.
I tried to explain to so many of my friends, I'm sure like you, around the country, and I guess everybody who knows a prominent politician from their city or their town can say the same thing. You guys don't know them. It's like we knew. I kept telling my friends when Rudy Giuliani was running for the presidency, I was like, the better you get to know him, the less you're going to like him. Like the longer he goes, because the more you know Rudy Giuliani, the less there is to like. And so his presidency was very predictable to us New Yorkers. Like, you guys love him because you don't know him.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I gave Giuliani credit for 9/11. That was his finest hour.
Yes.
How he conducted himself during 9/11 was wonderful. I thought when he was a super cop going after the mafia, that was a shining moment. Mm-hmm. Everything after that, as you say, boom. Yeah. And you're right. When you know someone, when it's your native son, and you know the warts and the sores and all of that, I thought his running was a joke. So when he won, it's like, well, the joke has won. And the ultimate joke is going to be played on America. And even though I didn't know how it would be played out, I knew that's what was coming. To me, it was just inevitable. Because I started with the fact that this is a man who had never held elected office for anything. I used to say he wasn't even a hall room monitor. He'd never been elected to anything. So the very first thing you run for is President of the United States, and you win. You have no qualifications. You don't know how to lead people. You don't know how to mobilize. You don't know how to administer. I mean, the basic things that you learn in elected office, he didn't have.
Well, he didn't know how to govern. And I tell people,
Right.
There's politics and then there's government.
Right.
And while I don't know how deep we're going to go into talking about the pandemic, but what we learned the hard way as a nation was the difference between people who could govern versus people who could do politics.
Exactly.
Because there's a different total skill set to actually run something.
Yes.
It's why governors and mayors actually took the lead, because the rubber has to hit the road when you're a governor and a mayor. It's not what press conferences. Something's got to happen every day.
right.
You know,
right. I mean, and that's where Cuomo today, people,
there's magazines.
Cuomo I thought was magnificent.
Yeah. You can't just posture as editors in chief and say, no, sooner or later, something has to get produced and get done. And that's
exactly.
That's
exactly. And even if you make a wrong call, you know what I loved about Cuomo, he was a master communicator. He had the daily press conferences, and he gave a press conference, and I thought this was so magnificent, and it's one thing Trump couldn't do. He said, I knew we had to do something. Was it the right thing to do? And he said, I didn't know. I didn't know. But I knew the only way to find out was to do it. And he even said at one point, would I have shut down the city completely the way I did? He said, probably not. But here was a man who was not afraid to say, I didn't know,
right?
But I knew something had to be done. Maybe I made a mistake, but at the time, that's what I had to do, take the chance. And when Bob Woodward talked about the fact that Donald Trump was informed of the severity of the pandemic, he had an opportunity to either go with that information or not. He chose not to. He made a bad call. Somebody, as you say, who knows how to govern would have taken it back and said, okay, this was not the right call. This is what we need to do. He never did that. He committed to the wrong course and he couldn't get off the road.
Wouldn't get off the road.
Wouldn't get off the road. Wouldn't get off the road. And that, as you say, that's the ultimate in bad governance. It's just bad because you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes.
Unavoidable.
Yeah. But if you don't try to correct your mistake, then it becomes a blunder. It becomes a catastrophe. And you are a horrible leader because you don't know how to lead. And you're not learning. You're not learning.
Yeah, I'm actually reading a book I literally just started this week called Ego is the Enemy. And
yes, I saw it on your post.
Yeah, those themes about the inability or unwillingness to learn.
Yeah.
The unwillingness to bring your ego into check. I mean, it just it's fresh in my mind because I literally just started reading it. But it's so much for those things. But take me back to the beginning. Now you've relocated to Paris, and now you're observing from a different vantage point living in France. I mean, not that you over the time you did come back and forth, but you're observing from your perspective, from where you were. What did it look like that we were going? Well, first before the pandemic, but
Okay, first, Alfred, I didn't think I was going to be there that long. I really thought, I was very naive, that in the first 100 days, everyone would recognize that this was a mistake, meaning the election of Trump was a mistake, and it would be corrected. Now, I didn't think of how it'd be corrected. He'd be impeached, he'd quit, but I figured the litmus test of the first 100 days, he'd be gone. When that didn't happen, I had to regroup and think about, well, I'm probably going to be here longer. What is that going to look like? And what am I going to be doing? And Morgan State reached out to me. They wanted, ER Ship contacted me and she wanted me to write something for their global communication. And I wrote something and we went back, it didn't really happen. But in doing that, I did a piece for the Huffington Post. And it was called Punking Out in Paris, or Why I Left America. And it got published and it got such a reaction. It got, I don't know, for me, 17,000 hits. And it made me think about, well, maybe there's a bigger piece here. maybe there is a book looking at why I left America when Trump came in. So that's where the genesis came. That's where the idea was sparked. And then what happened, it became, I called it writing in real time. Usually when you're doing something like a memoir, you're looking back and you're like the Ed Lewis book, he's looking back, he's chronicling what happened. I was in the moment. So now I have to write about current events. In other words, I'm living my story that I'm writing, which made it difficult in terms of getting a publisher. I had an agent. She was kind of submitting it in pieces, and editors weren't really going for that because I didn't have an end at the point that she's doing the submissions because it was still unfolding. And I had already determined it would have to be his first term. So I would have to live out as close as I could come to his 4 years. Once I realized he was going to be there 4 years. And that took a minute.
Let me inject here to our audience. This is one of the reasons why this book really is a great book to read, because you feel the sense of real time, almost urgency, because like you said, you can't really tell how the book is going to end because you're living it as
right.
you know. You're
right.
You know, yeah. So I want to say one of the great elements of why this book is a great read is because it wasn't like you had this either memoir where you could just kind of wrap a bow around what already happened, or you were writing about something that has happened in real time, but it was over. And now you're making sense of it. You're
going through it, going through it. And I'll tell you something, for me, a big anchor was Facebook. I was new to Facebook. I didn't go on Facebook or become a member of Facebook until 2016, the year Trump was elected. And that was also the year that Muhammad Ali died. And couple of my early biographies were for young people, and they were about Muhammad Ali. And I ended up going to his funeral because I have a friend who lives in Louisville. I stayed with her. So the first post I did was about his funeral. And I realized it reminded me of show and tell. I don't know by the time you got to school if you still had show and tell.
Yeah, we still had show and tell.
Yeah, show and tell. So to me, Facebook was like show and tell for adults. So I loved, it's like, this is what I did, look what I did. But it also became for me a way to record, especially when I was in Paris, what was happening. And reading the posts of people who were in America, who were friends of mine, I really had a sense, more than I would get from the news, of what was going on and how it was affecting people. Because my friends, for the most part, were Black Americans. They were smart. They were many writers, journalists, thinkers. So they were doing posts that really talked in an in-depth way about how this presidency was affecting them. And affecting the rest of the country. And looking at it 3,000 miles away was just a different vantage point. And in many ways, it was clearer because I was removed. And then I'm getting feedback from Black American expats who are in Paris. I'm getting feedback from French folk. My landlord was French. We would have these, political conversations. And the point he always made, he said, in France, it's about class. It's not about color. So their issues were more around colonialism. But what's interesting about the French, it is about class. If they see you, they're not responding to you as a Black person first. They're looking at how you're dressed. They're looking at your beard, they're looking at your handkerchief. So they're getting an image of you based on class. And that's very different from just this reaction of color. And we as Americans don't understand that because we're constantly being reacted to based on color.
Yes.
That's all people see. And in France, I have my friend Bob in Paris. Well, we would go into Hermes, we'd go into Louis Vuitton, we'd go into all these stores. Nobody blinked an eye. Because if you're in the store, the assumption is, even if you're not going to buy anything, you can be in the store.
Right.
There's not this, they're here to steal.
It's not the thing like, we don't take you know, cashier, or we don't take debit cards. You know, that whole assumption.
Yeah, or the assumption that you're here to shoplift.
Yeah, you're here to shoplift.
Or that you don't belong.
You don't
See,
belong.
that's the big thing. You
Yeah.
don't belong. I never went anywhere in Paris where I got the feeling I didn't belong. Mm. Whether it was Little Africa, going to the tailor shop where everybody is African, or being on Champs-Élysées and going into one of the fine department stores. I mean, I went into Printemps, which to me is the equivalent of Bloomingdale's, and the child thought I was Michelle Obama.
Right.
You know, so that is such a huge difference right there.
So now you've been there for a while. You realize that it's going to be more than 100 days. That this is
right.
This is going to be a little bit more than you thought when you left.
Yes.
And of course, none of us could have predicted what would happen, especially in the last 2 years.
Right.
But as things were unfolding, and you know, you could say, I mean, here's how I experienced it as someone living here, and someone again who's a New Yorker. So I kind of, you know, wasn't surprised by anything that happened. But every time you thought it couldn't get any worse, like every time you think there was a line, okay, he's not going to cross that line.
Right.
He's not going to cross that line.
Right.
And then you realize there's no line. You know,
that he can't cross.
That he can't cross.
Yes.
And so
yes.
What was your experience as you were watching this from afar? And of course, let me get to the point of the pandemic and how that was handled. And we ended with not one, but two impeachments. I mean, what did it look like from your point of view when you're watching this? Was it like, whoa, good thing I got out? Or
well, you know what, Alfred, I'll tell you something. In a way, I didn't feel I got out, because what shocked me most of all, and I was watching a lot of TV. I don't speak French, so it wasn't like I could read the newspapers. I listened to the radio because music is universal. I like the music. Didn't matter if I couldn't understand the lyrics. But every time I turned on the news, who did I see? Trump. And I remember, and I have a chapter in the book on this called, and I forgot the name, but it's Hear No Evil, See No News. I was stunned at how influential America is around the world. So whether it was French television, Al Jazeera in English, CNN, MSNBC, there were 7 or 8 English-speaking news channels. Trump led the news on every single news channel. So, and I said, oh, I left thinking I would get away from this. So the first thing I understood was how important America is to the rest of the world. So when he was canceling trade agreements and pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords and insulting Angela Merkel and tried to do a MASH number on Macron, the president of France, when he came to America, he's like, he's like pretty much making moves on him. It's for reverberating around the world because the rest of the world looked to America as the leader. And that to me was really pretty shocking because I didn't understand American influence on that level. But then I realized, as I looked at some of the young brothers, I have a whole chapter on riding in an Uber with this African brother. And when I got into his car, I said to myself, "Oh, we going to Wakanda?" Because my man was decked. He had on rings. He looked like he was channeling Chadwick Boseman.
Wow.
From Black Panther.
Wow.
He was clearly, this was his idol, this was his superhero, and it was an American influence. It was an American influence. Now, he was very much identified as an African, and he gave me perspective on that. The difference between the Africans in France and the African Americans here, the Africans aren't trying to be French. They're African. They have their language, they have their religion, they have their music. When I got into this brother's car, African music is pulsating. That's what's pulsating on his stereo. And at one point he said to me, "You like this music?" And then he talked about the cultural appropriation of Europeans trying to take the African music. But he clearly was an African. He was proud of it. And you're riding around in what I call this ridiculous getup. But I also knew he was not fearful of the cops pulling him over. and doing a George Floyd. He was not fearful of that because that's not how the police roll. They've had incidents and there have been complaints, but for the most part, law enforcement is not out hunting Black men because that's not their history. They didn't have slave patrols.
Right, right, right.
You know, so it's a different history, it's a different experience, and it's a different treatment. And there is, I think, just a greater respect for your humanity as a human being.
So in the moments we have left, or the minutes we have left, we have a little bit of time left. I want to fast forward to the present, which is both relevant to the release of the book, which again, I think is a very necessary read now in this moment. And the idea that while Donald Trump is no longer president, the elements that made him president did not go away. The things
absolutely not.
And you hear things like, you know, Stevie Wonder talked about relocating to Ghana. And I've talked to other, you know, people of color, not just Black people, who say, you know what, I don't know how long I'm going to really hang around here. Because, you know, because that just because the symbol of that element is gone, or the leader of that element is gone, the element that got him elected in the first place is, I mean, we saw from the you know, the attack on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
Yes. Here.
We're in another civil war.
Yes. So what is your take, and how do you feel now, you know, in terms of where you want to live, where do you think, or what is your take in general for whether you're African American, you decide to stay in America, you know, like,
you know what it is for me, Alfred? I'm too old. I've lost the fight. I've lost the fire in the belly. I just talked to an aunt of mine in Philly who's 85. And what she said to me summed it up. She said, you know something? I marched with Martin Luther King when I was in college. I got arrested with him. She said, I've done that. I'm not doing it again. Now, nobody expects her to do that at 85, but she summed up my sentiment. Now, I wasn't marching and getting arrested, but I fought those battles back in the 60s. I'm a baby boomer. I came out of that era. And we're back to fighting the same battle. We're back to fighting for voting rights, for God's sake.
Yeah, man.
You know? Now, the thing about Trump, he unleashed forces that had never gone away. Those rebel boys waving the Confederate flags, they lost that war 150 years ago. And the fact that they still are holding on to some legacy that's been long dead tells you where the country is. There is a faction that still is not dealing with the reality of America, which is, it is a multiracial country. It's multiracial, that's the fact. So you're attacking Asians, why? Because you think they brought the COVID virus to America, please. I mean, you still have these racist, irrational, demented attitudes that put everybody at risk. Everybody's at risk. You know, I can go to the Atlantic Terminal Mall, which I can walk to, and I could get shot. Because in America, you can buy, what do they call it? Assault weapons.
Yes.
You know, you can't do that in other countries. One of the things I felt in Paris all times of the day was safe. You know why? Nobody has a gun. And when you don't have guns, it's just like not having racism. When you don't have guns, it changes the nature of the interactions. They're not violent. People do not settle their differences violently. That's all a gun does. It gives you the option of killing someone in the absence of a rational discourse. And it changes the whole atmosphere. Even the hustlers in Paris, I love the hustlers. These dudes who would come up with a little business card. Hey, my cousin, you know, she braid your hair. You know, for you. And I would always say when they came up speaking French, I'd say, I don't speak no French. And they go, English, oui, I speak it. Come, my cousin will braid your hair. Nobody's pulling a gun and nobody is coming at you aggressively. I was with a cute little designer and these two little brothers, the two young brothers are sitting on a fence and we walk by and they go, hi. hi. And we didn't say anything, and then we finally spoke. And I said, in Brooklyn, you might encounter two brothers who will say, what, you got an attitude? You're too cute to speak? Well, what, you can't speak? They don't do that. That's not how anybody is rolling. It's not aggressive. It's not threatening. It's not menacing. You're not harassed. Now, women get harassed. It's not like they don't get harassed, but you don't feel endangered because you don't speak to someone. The brothers who are driving Ubers are not worried that cop is, as I said in the book, cop is not going to pull this brother over because he's playing his music too loud.
Much less getting shot because you're playing the music.
Yeah, that's not even, for the most part, it's only recently the European cops carried guns. They didn't carry guns. They had billy clubs.
Right.
But they weren't trying to shoot anybody. That's such an American phenomenon.
And again, to the point we made at the beginning of this conversation, it's like a fish doesn't know that he's in water because that's the only place he's been. Because you're like, and people ask him, do you love democracy? I said, I guess I do. But I've never
love the idea of democracy.
Yeah.
We love the idea.
I've never been anywhere else. So I say, how can I objectively, I love America, I love our country. But if I'm being honest, how can I objectively not love America when I've never really experienced any other form of cultural government? So to your point, whether you decide that you love America or you don't love it so much, getting outside of the fishbowl, if you will, allows you to have an objective opinion. Yes. Opposed to, I've been in water all my life, so why would I not like it?
And when we say things like, I'll never leave the country of my ancestors bathed in their blood. And I would say, why do I want to be on land that has my ancestors' blood on it? And it's not my land, it's the land of the indigenous people who were here before any of us got here. So that's the first thing. But the idea of being somewhere where my ancestors were slaughtered, killed, raped, maimed, I don't have sentiment about that. I really don't. That doesn't elicit any nostalgia for me. It's a brutal history. It's brutal. So I will own that, but I'm not going to claim it out of some sentimental notion that this is a land I can never leave. This is a bad land in every sense of the word. America is a bad land.
With literally blood on the hands and on the
Yes.
So what is your and I'm trying to be a little future focused as we come down the home stretch of this conversation. What is your hope for the book, and what is your new outlook now that you've had this experience? You knew what you expected when you first left, and then of course you've lived it. What is it for you now? What do you think about all these subject matters?
Well, for the book, I hope people buy the book, and you can buy it off of Amazon, or you can go to AmericanRunaway.com. So please buy the book. What I probably, if I'm fortunate enough to do this, is go back and forth. I'm never going to leave America for good. Why? I have a son and I have grandchildren. So that I am nostalgic about. I can get sentimental about that. That's family, it's roots. And I think, so even if I'm away, I'm going to come back. And I think I'd like to go back and forth. And I tell people, you don't have to pack up and move to get away. You can take a break. You can go to Jamaica for a weekend or a month or 3 months. I think it's important that we travel as a people, because travel, again, gets you out of the water that you don't know you're in until you're out of it. And those breaks are helpful for your mental health. I left America for my mental health and my spiritual health. I was very clear about that. I didn't want to be stressed. I didn't want to be always feeling depressed, which is what Trump did to us in many ways. The pandemic is a whole other thing. I was telling you I got made up today, but wearing a mask, and I'm sure I'm not the only woman going through this or the only person, my skin is shocked. My skin, I've broken out all over where the mask is. Because what does a mask do? You're breathing on you. You're breathing on you all the time.
And you're blocking your pores.
And yeah. So all of this has been stressful. All of this has been debilitating and wearying to our spirit. And I think we should just consciously try to get away from time to time.
This idea of rest and recovery, which, is a big part of, into bodybuilding and a big part of working out all the time gets into recovery. And I think one of the biggest revelations that I got from coming through the pandemic, I explained to people, I didn't really travel for myself up until this past couple of years before the pandemic.
You were traveling for work.
For business. I went to conference, and I went to nice places, but it's not going to a nice place because you're working at a conference or you're interviewing somebody, you're giving a speech. It's not the same as, no, I'm going to enjoy myself.
Exactly.
And I realized that I had very little experience. I mean, I've been working since I was 14. I worked every summer in high school, nearly every summer in college. And then you start working, and in your career, when I was working at Big Red News in Brooklyn, I didn't have vacation money. So when I was off vacation, I was home. But and then, of course, you know how I am and how Black Enterprise could be. We work, it's mission oriented. So it's
yes.
I became a husband, I became a father. And I realized, you're in your late 50s and you don't know what it means to actually take a vacation. And when, so you talk about the importance of, even if you don't relocate to Paris, and I've had a passport for 30 years. But now I'm only realizing how valuable that is to say, I don't have to just go to Atlanta. I could go to, and I've been to Jamaica many times because of my kids, but Dominican Republic, and I've never been to Europe yet. So, I got to fix that. I got to get to Paris, and it's about appreciating, not only from the standpoint, like you said, of the politics and the racism of this country, but you talk about the mental wellness, emotional wellness, and for me, the recognition that I am a citizen of the world. I shouldn't be so sentimentally attached to the land here in America that I am to the land in Nigeria or in France or anywhere else, because that's what we're citizens. We're citizens of the world. We've been acculturated to a certain country and a certain nationality.
I took my son to Paris when he was 15, and I have a cousin who lives in Brussels. He's a graffiti artist. He's done very well. The joke is, when he was growing up in the South Bronx, he now speaks 6 languages. When he was growing up, family would say, well, when's that boy going to get a real job? So I took Hugo to Paris, and then we went to Brussels, and Chuck took us to the market where he spoke Flemish to get the food he wanted. And then he took us to his great apartment, and he cooked this wonderful meal. And my son at 15 is sitting in the living room, and he's looking around, and he just said, I want to live like this when I'm grown up.
Wow.
And what it told me was at that age, now he's got 4 kids and lives in New Jersey, but at that age, he had a sense of what else was possible. And that's what I think travel does for people, and it definitely does it for kids. And when his wife turned 40, her surprise birthday gift was a trip to Paris. And he wanted me to go because, he wanted me to help with the money, I think, a little bit. But he wanted me to and I had a friend there who took us to Versailles and all of this. But taking him to Paris at 15 just expanded him in a whole other kind of way. And when he sat in Chuck's apartment and said, I want to live like this when I grow up, that to me was worth the cost of the trip. It really was.
Well, like him, I'm coming to Paris as soon as I can get there.
Good. And I hope I'm there to see you and hang out.
I'm not coming unless you're not there. So
yeah, and just quickly, Europe right now is having a harder time of it with COVID than we are.
Yeah.
So that's been sobering and daunting. But I still, hope to go back by the fall. I want to promote the book there. It's sold out in one of the bookstores. It's been very well received. So that's gratifying. That's very gratifying. And it's just been, you know,
a good time to go, and that you're going to be there.
Yes,
I'm coming.
yes. And I love it when Americans come to visit. I love it, love it, love it. That's a favorite thing. Yeah.
You know, ironically, it's not ironically, the interesting thing is I was a French student in high school.
Really?
And I was in the National French Honor Society.
Oh, wow. So you speak French?
I used to.
Oh, it'll come back. I wish I had taken French, Alfred. It'll come back.
I can still read it and to some degree write it. I'm not good at speaking it anymore, so I've been saying since I was 15, I want to go to Paris because I love the language.
Okay.
And you know, so I'm at the stage now, like no more someday.
Yeah.
Now, like no, yeah. I'm gonna do this. So
yeah, and the French will love you, honey. They will love you.
And I'll love them right back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know, you and I can talk forever.
I know. It's so much fun.
I adore you, and I just thank you so much for being just a model of how to be.
Oh, Alfred, thank you. But I learned so much from you youngins, honey. You and Derek, man, you guys were so impressive when I was at Black Enterprise. I still say the smartest thing Earl Graves ever did was hire you two young men.
Oh, thank you so
much. Smartest thing. And he knows it.
Well, thank you for being my guest on Beyond the Hype.
Thank you for inviting
me. Make sure you go out and get American Runway. This conversation should give you at least 10 reasons to go.
Yes, Amazon, order from Amazon. It's not in bookstores yet. Order from Amazon.
That's where we all order anybody. Don't pretend y'all like looking for bookstores. Just go ahead.
I know. That's why bookstores are going under.
Exactly. So, but yeah, great read, great author,
thank you.
Great person, great woman, just great.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you so much for being my guest on Beyond the Hype.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
And this has been the latest episode of Beyond the Hype. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP, Executive Editor-at-Large at Black Enterprise. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.